in the smog-choked bowels of Earth's orbital ring, where the air smelled like burnt toast and bad decisions, Dr. Alden Quill was up to his elbows in things that made most people lose their breakfast. And that was on a good day. Today, however, he was staring at a chunk of rock that wasn't supposed to be there. An asteroid that, according to every radar, telescope, and bored astronomer, was on a one-way trip to the deep, dark oblivion of the universe. Instead, it had pulled a U-turn and parked itself right in the middle of Earth's most lucrative trash heap. "Take a look at this, Juno," Alden said, kicking a loose piece of metal across the lab. It clattered against a wall, narrowly missing a stack of overpriced equipment that probably did nothing. Juno, his AI assistant with a personality as dry as Martian soil, immediately responded. "Fascinating, Doctor. An asteroid with delusions of grandeur. Shall I fetch you a matching tinfoil hat?" Juno's voice crackled through the chamber, dripping with synthetic sarcasm. Alden squinted at the readouts. "This isn't your garden-variety space rock. It's leaking something leaking. As in, call a plumber or call the military, let's just say it's not leaking rainbows and sunshine." Juno paused, as if deciding whether to deliver a witty retort or a comforting platitude. It settled on neither. "I'll alert the higher-ups. They always appreciate a good existential crisis before lunch," Alden chuckled. "Make sure they know it's a BIOB event. Bring your own bombs." The orbital ring, a once grandiose attempt at human expansion, had become the universe's most expensive junkyard. It was a place for the discarded, the forgotten, and for Alden, the place where dreams went to die. He fit right in. The rock, though, was different. It radiated a cold menace, the kind that made even the cockroaches rethink their life choices. Alden felt a tickle at the back of his mind, a reminder that he hadn't signed up for this level of weird. "Well," he muttered, "I guess I better assemble the circus." The circus, of course, was Alden's hand-picked team of misfits, each one a specialist in their field and each one as socially adept as a caffeinated skunk. They were perfect. First up was Skelly, an ex-soldier turned security expert who'd once been kicked out of the Galactic Marines for excessive sarcasm. His uniform still fit, though his sense of tact had long since retired. "Hey, Skelly," Alden greeted, catching the soldier in mid-cigar puff. "Ever feel like you're being watched by something that doesn't have eyes?" Skelly exhaled a cloud of smoke that could have killed lesser men. "You mean like my ex? What's up?" Quill found a rock. "Might be an alien weapon. Figured you'd want in." Skelly's grin was wolfish. "Aliens, huh? I hope they brought beer." Next was Dr. Lyra Voss, a xenobiologist with a penchant for dissecting anything that wriggled. Lyra wore her disdain for humanity like a badge of honor, which made her the life of any party, as long as it was a funeral. "Lyra," Alden called, interrupting her mid-dissection of a particularly nasty specimen. "Got something that might interest you. Possibly alive, definitely dangerous, dangerous." Lyra looked up, eyes gleaming with professional curiosity. "You shouldn't have." Finally, there was Kellen, a hacker who could make a toaster overthrow a government. He'd been avoiding any semblance of a legitimate job for years, which made him the perfect candidate for Alden's brand of chaos. "Kellen, I've got a puzzle for you. Alien origin, potentially explosive. You in?" Kellen's laughter was infectious, like a virus you couldn't quite rid yourself of. "Explosive, you say? Music to my ears, Doc. Let's blow some minds, literally." With the team assembled, Alden returned to the lab where the ominous rock sat like a cosmic middle finger, daring them to poke it. "Welcome to the end of the world," Alden said, gesturing grandly at the asteroid. "Hope you all brought your sense of humor." Skelly leaned in, inspecting the rock with the keen eye of someone who's seen one too many things go boom. "Looks like a giant turd," he observed, deadpan. "Good to see your taste in art hasn't improved," Lyra quipped. Kellen was already tapping away on a tablet, interfacing with the lab systems. "Let's see what this baby's hiding," he muttered, fingers dancing across the screen. As data spilled in, Alden felt a shiver of anticipation. It could be nothing. Just a big, dumb rock, or it could change everything. Whatever it is, it's packed with more energy than a hyperactive toddler on a sugar high, Kellen announced, eyes widening. So we've got a space rock on steroids. What's the plan, Doc? Skelly asked, leaning against a console with the casual air of someone who knew plans were generally optional. We study it. Carefully, Alden replied, the word carefully hanging in the air like a promise he didn't intend to keep. Juno chimed in, her tone a perfect blend of support and snark. And if it decides to explode and take us with it, well, at least we won't have to worry about paying rent, Alden shrugged. Lyra grinned, a flash of teeth that suggested she was more than ready for whatever chaos awaited. Let's get to work. I've always wanted to dissect an asteroid. Time slipped by in the lab, measured in cups of synth coffee and the steady hum of computers. The team worked like a well-oiled machine, if that machine was continually sabotaged by its own parts. Kellen's fingers never stopped moving, plugging into alien systems that felt bizarrely intuitive and utterly alien. Skelly provided commentary, from tactical suggestions to the odd limerick about alien anatomy. Lyra, meanwhile, cataloged every anomaly with the meticulousness of someone who intended to write a best-selling book about it. As Alden watched his ragtag teamwork, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: hope. A dangerous emotion, especially when your job involved poking things that might poke back. They're arguing about what to do with it up top, Juno reported, her voice echoing through the lab. Most of them seem to think it's a threat. Some of them think it's a sign. All of them think it's a pain in the ass. That's humanity for you, Alden mused. Always turning cosmic mysteries into committee meetings. And what do you think, Doc? Skelly asked, his curiosity genuine. I think we're playing with fire, Alden admitted, his gaze fixed on the rock. And I think I've never had so much fun. As they delved deeper, the asteroid revealed more secrets, like a gambler losing layers at a particularly risky game of strip poker. Signals pulsed within its core, patterns that felt purposeful, almost alive. This isn't just a weapon, Lyra breathed, her voice hushed with awe. It's something else. Something more, great. Something more always ends well, Skelly muttered, adjusting his grip on his sidearm. Alden nodded, his mind racing. If this thing was what he thought it was, it might hold the key to understanding an alien threat, or facing one head-on. Well, folks, he announced, trying to keep the excitement from coloring his voice, I do believe we've stumbled onto the universe's biggest game of chicken, and we're the chickens. Kellen asked, a grin tugging at his lips. Looks like it, Alden replied. And I've never been much for losing. The lab buzzed with urgency, everyone aware that time was slipping through their fingers like sand. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Alden didn't mind. Uncertainty meant possibility, and possibility meant hope. Then Juno's voice cut through their focus, more urgent than before. Doctor, we have incoming communications. It's the big wigs. Alden's heart skipped. Patch them through. The image on the screen was predictably dire, a testament to how many bureaucrats it took to screw in a light bulb. The speaking head was all furrowed brow and wrinkles, like a prune that had slightly more authority. Dr. Quill, the bureaucrat began, voice like a robot with an attitude problem, we've been monitoring your activities. We need to know the status of the object. Alden smiled, hoping it didn't look too much like a grimace. It's a rock, gentlemen. A very special rock. Possibly the most special rock since the dawn of time. The bureaucrat was not amused. This is no time for jokes, Doctor. Is it a threat? Depends on your definition of threat. We need specifics. Alden exchanged glances with his team, each one sharing the same thought. It's packed with energy and possibly alive, he finally said. Or at least it thinks. If it wanted to explode, it probably could. The bureaucrat's frown deepened, if that was even possible. And your recommendation let us do what we do best. Study it, learn from it. Maybe even turn it into something that benefits humanity instead of just blowing it up and calling it a day. The bureaucrat sighed, a sound that spoke volumes about paperwork and committee meetings. Very well, Dr. Quill. You have provisional clearance. But know this, The moment it becomes a threat, we'll solve it the old-fashioned way. Understood, Alden replied, his voice steady. The screen went dark, and the lab was once more filled with the low hum of machinery and the unspoken weight of what lay ahead. Well, that was cheery, Skelly said. What now, boss, now? Alden grinned, feeling the spark of adventure reignite within him. Now we show the universe what a bunch of misfits can do. And with that, they dove back into their work, knowing full well that the worst, or perhaps the best, was yet to come. Alden Quill was knee-deep in existential crises when the lab door whooshed open, revealing Ree Verdon, the pilot who treated personal safety like an optional side quest. Ree had a swagger that said she owned the room, or at least that she rented it under an assumed name. "Doc, you got something that needs flying, or are we just playing house?" she drawled, leaning against a console like she planned to marry it. Alden glanced up, forcing a smile through the creeping dread of cosmic mysteries. "Ah, Ree. Just the reckless abandon I needed." Ree grinned, the kind of grin that promised either adventure or imminent arrest. "What's the deal with the oversized space pebble, beyond theoretical existential annihilation?" "Just another Tuesday," Skelly added, flicking ash from his cigar with practiced disdain. "We're trying to figure out if it's more than just a rock," Alden explained, gesturing weakly at the ominous mass. "It's got biological components, probably designed to target humanity." Ree raised an eyebrow. "So, it's like the universe's worst love letter, something like that," Alden replied, wondering why he'd ever thought sanity was a good idea. Right on cue, Lorne Zill wandered in, his expression a mix of curiosity and the perpetual disappointment of someone who expected the bar to be a little higher. As a xenobiologist, he had the bedside manner of a dentist who just had a bad day. "Lorne, welcome to the chaos," Alden greeted, trying to sound chipper. Lorne peered at the rock, his interest piqued. "If this thing's alive, it's a poor conversationalist. Isn't that true for most of your dates?" Skelly quipped, earning a snicker from Ree. "Very funny, Skelly," Lorne grunted. "I'll have you know my last date was fascinating. She had a parasitic twin." Kellen looked up from his tablet, eyes glinting with mischief. "Sounds like a ménage à trois with extra steps." Alden shook his head, trying to wrangle the conversation back on track. "Ree, I need you ready to fly. If things go south, we might need an exit strategy. Deal?" "Just promise me there'll be something to shoot at," Ree replied, her fingers itching for action. "Or someone," Skelly added, "always game for a little violence. Can we focus on the rock and not the homicidal tendencies?" Alden suggested, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Fine, fine. What do we know about it?" Ree asked, crossing her arms. Lorne took the floor, his voice flat and clinical. "It's got a biological design. Advanced, intricate, possibly engineered to interface with human physiology." "Great. So it's a glorified death trap," Ree deadpanned. "That's one way to look at it," Lorne replied, unfazed. Juno's voice crackled to life, her tone dripping with faux enthusiasm. "Technically, it's a marvel of biological engineering. Practically, it's a giant screw-you to humanity. Isn't everything?" Skelly muttered, his cigar now a stub. Alden leaned over the data, trying to wrap his head around the implications. "If it's meant to target us specifically, we need to understand how and why. Because if we don't, someone's going to panic and blow it up," Lyra added from her corner, where she was eagerly dissecting the asteroid's mysteries. Lorne nodded, his eyes gleaming with academic curiosity. "If we could harness its tech, it'd be a game changer. Or a game ender," Kellen countered, ever the pessimist. Alden rubbed his chin, lost in thought. "Right now, nations are fighting over who gets to decide what happens to this thing. We've got diplomats sharpening their knives and generals readying their toys. Sounds like a typical day," Ree said, unfazed. "Yeah, but this time the stakes are higher," Alden replied, his voice grave. "If it falls into the wrong hands, we're talking global catastrophe." Ree blew out a breath, her cocky demeanor slipping for a moment. "So, what's the plan, boss? We figure out as much as we can, as fast as we can. Keep it out of the politicians' hands until we know what we're dealing with." "Good luck with that," Skelly said, with enough irony to sink a ship. Alden turned to the team, his face set with determination. We're going to crack this thing open. Lorne, focus on the biological data. Kellen, see what you can glean from the tech. Ree, stay ready. We might need a quick getaway, and me? Skelly asked, eyes twinkling with mischief. Keep doing what you're doing. Providing moral support and scaring the crap out of anyone who asks too many questions. Skelly saluted with mock seriousness. Aye, aye, Captain. As the team scattered to their tasks, Alden felt the weight of the world, or several, pressing down on his shoulders. The rock, the ultimate enigma. It could either save them or doom them, and it was up to this patchwork family of misfits to figure out which. Time trundled on, the lab a hive of activity and caffeine-infused determination. Lorne dove into his work like a detective with a murder board, connecting dots that might not even exist. Ran maintenance on the ship, ready to blast off at a moment's notice. Kellen worked his digital magic, cracking codes and unspooling alien algorithms with a hacker's zeal. Then there was Alden, overseeing it all, trying not to let the enormity of the task crush him. He was a scientist, not a savior. But sometimes you had to fake it till you made it. Just as he was contemplating the cosmic joke his life had become, Juno spoke up, her voice slicing through the room. Incoming message, Doc. Looks like the political circus has decided to weigh in again. Alden sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Patch it through, Juno. Let's hear what the esteemed committee has to say. The screen flickered to life, revealing a cavalcade of grim faces. More bureaucrats, each one looking like they'd been carved from the same block of granite, cold, unyielding, and entirely too serious. Dr. Quill, the head bureaucrat, began, his voice as dry as a Martian desert. We require an update on the situation. Alden forced a smile, the kind that hid a multitude of sins. We're making progress. The rock's more complex than we anticipated, and the threat level. Another bureaucrat demanded, her eyes sharp as a hawk's, still assessing. But it's safe to say it's significant, and your team. The head bureaucrat continued, not missing a beat. Are they capable of handling this? Alden resisted the urge to laugh. They're the best we've got. A little unorthodox, but sometimes that's what you need. A skeptical eyebrow was raised. We'll need more than unorthodox, Doctor. The decisions made here will affect the entire planet. No pressure, right? Ree quipped under her breath. The nations involved are growing restless, the bureaucrat continued, his tone a perfect mix of condescension and impatience. There are those who believe the safest course is to blow it up. Alden interrupted, his irritation bubbling to the surface. Let's not pretend that's not the plan B. A murmur of discontent rippled through the panel. We prefer the term neutralize, another bureaucrat clarified, as if semantics would make the explosion any less real. Alden took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of patience he had left. Give us time. If we can understand it, maybe we can control it. Use it. There was a pause, a collective weighing of options. Finally, the head bureaucrat nodded curtly. You have 72 hours, Dr. Quill. After that, control will be assumed by those better equipped to handle such threats. The screen went dark, leaving behind the familiar hum of the lab and the sense of impending doom. 72 hours, Ree repeated, shaking her head. No pressure. Plenty of pressure, actually, Kellen corrected, not looking up from his screen. Then let's not waste time, Alden said, steel in his voice. We've got 3 days to save the world, or at least not blow it up. Lorne nodded, already lost in thought. We'll need to unlock the core function, see if we can communicate with it, or at least find the off switch, Skelly added, ever the optimist. Alden smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. It was a long shot, but sometimes long shots were all you had. As the team got back to work, Alden allowed himself a moment of reflection. This was it, their chance to prove the naysayers wrong. To show that sometimes the misfits, the outcasts, and the ones who didn't color within the lines were exactly what the universe needed. The clock was ticking, and failure wasn't just an option, it was the most likely outcome. But as Alden looked around at his team, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. And sometimes, a flicker was all you needed to start a fire. The lab was a beehive of frenetic energy, the hum of machinery and the clatter of keyboards underlining the tension like the soundtrack to a bad disaster movie. Alden stood with his arms crossed, watching his team dive deeper into the rock's secrets like sailors trying to fix holes in a sinking ship. He couldn't shake the feeling that their time was running out, and it wasn't a comfortable sensation. Lorne was knee-deep in Petri dishes and microscopes, muttering to himself as he tried to decipher the biological components of the space rock. "If this thing's alive, it's a very pissed-off organism," he grumbled, adjusting a slide with the precision of a surgeon and the disposition of a hangry man. Ree, meanwhile, leaned against the wall, watching like a bored cat ready to pounce. "So, Doc, what's the odds we all end up with radioactive mutant powers from this little science project?" she asked, a sly grin tugging at her lips. "Knowing our luck, we'll just get extra toes," Alden replied, rolling his eyes. "Focus, people. We've got 72 Iors and a rock that might decide it hates us. Oh, you mean like the rest of the universe?" Ree shot back, her voice a melody of sarcasm. Juno's voice crackled through the speakers, mock enthusiasm dripping from every syllable. "Update. The political circus is still in full swing. They're juggling knives and trying not to trip over their own egos." "Comforting," Skelly chimed in, puffing on his cigar, which had somehow grown to full size again. Alden suspected he had a stash hidden in one of his many pockets like a magician with a very specific trick. In the corner, Kellen tapped away at his tablet, his fingers moving with practiced precision. "I've cracked the first layer of coding. This tech is like a labyrinth designed by a psychopath. Sounds like my last boyfriend," Ree quipped, earning a snort from Lorne. Alden tried to ignore the banter, focusing instead on the swirling data on his monitor. The asteroid's biological components were intricate, tangled like a ball of yarn after cats had their way with it. He felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, heavier than the universe's worst hangover. "Lorne, any progress on communicating with it?" Alden asked, trying to inject some optimism into his voice. "If by progress you mean I'm not completely clueless, then yes," Lorne replied, peering through a microscope. "It's like trying to have a conversation with a drunk octopus." Before Alden could respond, a warning beep pierced the lab's chaotic symphony. Juno's voice followed, now tinged with what sounded suspiciously like concern. Doc, we've got a situation." "Define situation," Alden said, dread coiling in his stomach like a snake that just caught scent of its next meal. "Something activated on the rock. It's releasing." "Something," Juno replied, her tone as cheerful as a funeral dirge. "Something," re-echoed, moving away from the wall, her expression shifting from bored to battle-ready. "You want to be a little more specific." "Airborne particles," Juno clarified, "and they're spreading through the orbital ring particles." "Great. Just what we needed." "Cosmic dandruff," Skelly muttered, flicking ash from his cigar with practiced disdain. Alden rushed to a screen displaying the orbital ring's layout. Red dots began to bloom across the map like a rash, each one marking a location where the particles had reached. "We need to contain this now, and how exactly do you plan to do that?" Kellen asked, not looking up from his tablet. "With duct tape and optimism. Start by sealing off the lab," Alden ordered, trying not to sound as panicked as he felt. "Juno, initiate lockdown protocol." "On it," Juno replied, and a series of metallic clangs echoed through the lab as doors sealed shut, trapping them inside with their ticking time bomb. Lorne straightened, his face a mask of grim determination. "We need to analyze the particles, figure out what they are doing. Hopefully not turning us into zombies," Ree said, securing her own makeshift gas mask. "Or worse, accountants." "Focus," Alden barked, trying to rein in his team's gallows humor, no matter how much it lightened the mood. "Kellen, keep working on cracking the tech." "Lorne, get me a sample of those particles." Skelly took his cigar from his mouth, regarding it like it might hold the answers to the universe's problems. "And me? I suppose I'll just keep the mood light." or at least slightly less grim, Kellen added, tapping away. Alden moved to assist Lorne, the two of them working in tandem to extract a sample of the ominous particles. The air in the lab felt thick with tension, the kind of tension that made every breath feel like a gamble. Ree stood near the sealed door, tapping her foot impatiently. "You know, this is not what I imagined when I signed up for this gig. I thought we'd be kicking alien butt, not playing the world's worst escape room." "Welcome to science," Alden replied, carefully sealing a vial. "Where the mysteries far outweigh the victories. Sounds like my dating life," Ree quipped. "Let's hope it has a better ending," Lorne said, peering at the particles under a microscope. Time ticked by with all the grace of a drunk stumbling home after last call. Lorne's brow furrowed in concentration, his eyes scanning the sample as if it held the secrets of the universe. "This stuff is reactive," he announced, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Define reactive," Alden said, leaning over to peer at the data. "It's interacting with the air, forming new compounds. Whatever it's doing, it's changing the environment," Lorne explained, his voice less clinical and more intrigued. "It could be terraforming on a micro scale. Terraforming. As in turning the orbital ring into its own little vacation spot," Ree asked, her tone incredulous. "Or an inhospitable wasteland," Kellen suggested, ever the optimist. Alden tried to process this new information, his mind racing with possibilities and dangers. "We've got to find a way to neutralize it. If it spreads further, we're screwed." Skelly finished for him, blowing smoke rings with the nonchalance of a man who had long ago made peace with the universe's indifference. "Pretty much," Alden admitted, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Juno's voice broke through the tension, calm and unruffled. "Incoming message, Doc, from the bureaucrats. Just what we needed," Alden sighed. "Patch it through." The screen flickered to life, revealing the same grim faces as before. The head bureaucrat leaned forward, his expression a mix of impatience and barely concealed disdain. "Dr. Quill, we've detected an anomaly in the orbital ring." "Yeah, that would be us," Alden admitted, trying not to sound defensive. "We had a slight incident." The bureaucrat repeated, his voice dripping with suspicion. "We're handling it," Alden assured, his tone conveying more confidence than he felt. "Just need a bit more time. We can't afford an outbreak," another bureaucrat interjected, her eyes like daggers. "Contain it or we will." Alden nodded, his mind already spinning with plans and contingencies. "We're working on a solution. Just don't blow anything up yet. You have 48 hours," the head bureaucrat declared, looking like he'd rather swallow nails than give them any leeway. "After that, we take action." The screen went dark, leaving Alden and his team with the weight of the world on their shoulders, or at least the weight of the orbital ring. 48 hours, Alden muttered, turning to face his team. "We've got 2 days to stop this thing. Plenty of time," Ree said with a confidence she probably didn't feel. "Yeah, for miracles," Skelly added, flicking ash from his cigar. "We need a plan," Alden declared, forcing himself to focus. "Lorne, see if you can synthesize a neutralizer for these particles. Kellen, keep working on the tech angle. Ree, prep the ship. We may need to improvise an escape, and me?" Skelly asked, eyes twinkling. "Keep doing what you're doing. We might need the comic relief." As the team scattered to their tasks, Alden felt a familiar mix of dread and determination. The stakes were high, the odds long, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were onto something. The clock was ticking faster than ever, and failure loomed like a shadow at their backs. But as Alden watched his team work, he felt a spark of hope. Sometimes, a spark was all it took to light the way forward. Alden Quill leaned over Lorne's shoulder as the xenobiologist continued to mutter at the Petri dish like it had personally wronged him. The lab was a cacophony of beeping machines and underbreath curses, the kind of place where a person could lose their mind if they weren't careful, or if they cared too much. "Terraforming in a lab," Alden mused. "And here I thought my biggest problem today would be finding a decent cup of coffee." "Coffee's the least of our worries, Doc," Ree said, her voice carrying over from where she was sprawled over a chair, her feet kicked up on a console like she owned the place. "Unless these particles have a caffeine addiction too. Please, no. I'd rather fight them off with a spoon than share my stash," Skelly added, blowing a smoke ring that seemed to hover in the air with ominous purpose. Alden looked around at his motley crew of misfits, each one a specialist in making a bad situation worse. Yet somehow, they were his best shot at turning this cosmic disaster into something resembling a win. "All right, listen up," he said, clapping his hands together to get their attention. "I've got a plan." "Does it involve us running away and pretending this never happened?" Kellen asked without looking up from his tablet, fingers flying over the screen like a pianist on a caffeine binge. "Not quite," Alden replied, though the thought was tempting. "We're going to take a moonshot. What if we could reprogram this rock's genetic code and turn it into a cure? Something humanity could actually use for once." Ree raised an eyebrow, amusement playing across her features. "A cure? For what? Our collective stupidity, amongst other things," Alden retorted, trying to maintain some semblance of authority. "Think about it. We've got a potential biological goldmine here. Cancer, autoimmune diseases, maybe even a cure for bureaucracy." Lorne looked up from his microscope, skepticism dripping from his voice. "And you think this thing will just roll over and let us rewrite its DNA like some cosmic guinea pig?" "Exactly," Kellen added, tapping at his tablet with increasing frustration. "And what if it decides to rewrite us instead?" Alden felt the weight of their doubt, but he pressed on. "We've got to try. If we can convert its genetic structure, we might be able to contain it more effectively. Or unleash something even worse," Ree said, leaning forward with a dangerous gleam in her eye. "I mean, what if it turns us into the monsters instead?" Skelly chuckled, puffing on his cigar like he was the star of his own private action movie. "We could always start a sideshow. Step right up, see the amazing tentacle humans." "Spare me the visuals, Skelly," Alden said, rubbing his temples. "Look, I know it's a long shot. But do we have any better options?" Silence fell over the lab, filled only with the hum of machinery and the occasional drip of sarcasm. It was the kind of silence that could drive a person mad or push them into action. Finally, Lorne sighed, the sound like air escaping a punctured balloon. "If we're going to do this, we're going to need some serious tech. And a miracle wouldn't hurt either." "Kellen, how's that magic touch of yours?" Alden asked, trying to inject some optimism into his voice. "Magic's overrated," Kellen replied, his eyes never leaving the screen. "But give me a few Iors and I might be able to crack another layer. No promises." "Great. And Lorne, get me a list of potential diseases we could target with this genetic code. Focus on the big hitters." "And what about me?" Ree asked, a mischievous twinkle in her eye. "Am I on damage control or do you have something more suicidal in mind?" Alden considered her for a moment, appreciating her reckless enthusiasm. "Prep the ship for launch just in case. If this goes south, we're going to need a quick exit." Skelly leaned back in his chair, cigar dangling from his lips like it had all the answers. "Good thing I never liked spending too long in one place anyway." With the plan, or lack thereof, in motion, Alden turned back to his monitors, the weight of their predicament settling over him like a heavy coat. It was the kind of weight that threatened to crush a man if he wasn't careful. "Juno," he called out as if addressing the air itself. "How's the containment holding up?" "It's as stable as a politician on a pogo stick," Juno replied, her voice oozing wry amusement. "Comforting," Alden muttered, checking the map of the orbital ring again. The red dots seemed to pulse with a life of their own, each one a reminder of how close they were to catastrophe. He glanced over at Lorne, who was busy analyzing another sample, his brow furrowed in concentration. "How's it looking on your end?" "Complicated," Lorne replied, his voice a low rumble. "These particles are like nothing I've ever seen. Adaptable, almost sentient." "Lovely," Alden said, feeling the weight of those words. "Just what we needed." "Sentient particles. Should we start introducing ourselves?" Ree quipped, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. "Maybe they just want to be friends. Not the kind of friends I'm looking for, Alden shot back, trying to focus on the task at hand. Let's keep moving. We've got less than 48 hours before the bureaucrats decide we're expendable. More like 48 minutes if those particles decide to get creative, Skelly added, waving his cigar like a conductor's baton. Alden couldn't argue with that. The pressure was mounting, the clock ticking with relentless precision. But beneath the tension, there was a flicker of hope, a chance that they might actually pull this off. The idea of turning a potential weapon into something beneficial was tantalizing, the kind of long shot that might just pay off. And if it didn't, well, they'd go down swinging. As the team dove into their tasks, Alden felt a spark of determination reignite within him. They were facing impossible odds, teetering on the brink of disaster, but they were fighting back. And sometimes in the depths of despair, that was all you needed. Ree's voice broke the momentary silence, a sharp edge of sarcasm cutting through the tension. "Hey, Kellen, any luck with that tech witchcraft of yours?" Kellen looked up, his eyes bleary from staring at the screen for too long. "Depends on what you mean by luck. I've got a few ideas, but nothing sticking yet. It's like trying to read a book in a language I don't even know exists." "Sounds familiar," Ree said, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "So we're winging it then, just like old times." "Yeah, except this time the stakes are a bit higher," Kellen replied, his fingers dancing over the tablet in a rhythm only he understood. "Keep at it," Alden urged, turning his attention back to Lorne. "What about you? Any progress on the biological front?" Lorne grunted, peering into his microscope with an intensity that suggested he was trying to will the particles into submission. "These things are like the universe's worst prank. They adapt to every countermeasure like they are laughing at us." "Great, we've got particles with a sense of humor," Alden said, shaking his head. "Just what we needed." "Well, if they start telling jokes, at least we'll know they're sentient," Skelly chimed in, puffing on his cigar with a grin. "I'm not sure if that's comforting or terrifying," Alden replied, rubbing the back of his neck. Amidst the banter, Ree stood, stretching with the grace of a cat before strolling over to the viewport. She stared out at the swirling void of space, her expression thoughtful. "So, Doc," she said after a moment, her voice softened by distance. "What's the real plan here? We crack this thing open, turn it into a miracle cure, and then what? Save the day and get a pat on the back." Alden joined her, gazing out at the infinite darkness dotted with distant stars. "If we pull this off, maybe we get a bit of breathing room. Buy ourselves some time to figure out the next mess." "And if we don't?" she asked, her tone light but with an undercurrent of seriousness. "Then we go out with a bang," Alden replied, meeting her gaze. "But I'd rather not test that theory." Ree nodded, a silent agreement passing between them. It was the kind of moment that reminded Alden why he kept fighting, why he didn't just throw in the towel and let the universe have its way. "All right, team," he called, turning back to the others. "Let's get back to work. We've got a rock to crack and a potential cure to concoct. No pressure." "Pressure's overrated," Skelly said, flicking ash from his cigar with casual ease. "It's what keeps things interesting." Alden couldn't help but smile at that, despite the looming danger. They were a ragtag bunch, each one a misfit in their own way, but they had something that mattered, a will to fight, to push against the odds no matter how steep. As the clock continued its relentless countdown, Alden felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were in this together, for better or worse, and they'd see it through to the end. With any luck, they'd come out the other side with a victory worth celebrating, or at least a story worth telling over a stiff drink. The hours ticked by, filled with the rhythmic clatter of keyboards, the soft whir of machinery, and the occasional outburst of frustration. Each passing minute was a reminder of the stakes, of how close they were to either disaster or salvation. Kellen's fingers tapped out a staccato beat on his tablet, a steady stream of code and data flowing across the screen. "Got something," he announced suddenly, breaking the tense silence. Everyone looked up, a collective breath held in anticipation. "What have you got?" Alden asked, stepping closer. "Managed to crack another layer," Kellen replied, a hint of triumph in his voice. It's like peeling an onion from hell, but we're getting there. I think I can access some of the rock's subroutines, maybe even override them. Override them how? Ree asked, her interest piqued. Think of it like flipping a switch, Kellen explained, his fingers working furiously. If we can change how the particles interact with their environment, we might stop the spread. Or at least slow it down. Alden felt a flicker of hope at Kellen's words. It was a small victory, but they needed every win they could get. Great work, Kellen, Alden said, clapping him on the shoulder. Keep at it. Every layer we crack gets us closer to turning this thing into something useful. Just doing my job, Doc, Kellen replied, though Alden could see the spark of determination in his eyes. Lorne looked up from his microscope, a thoughtful expression on his face. And if we combine that with the biological angle, then we might just have a chance, Alden finished for him, feeling the pieces of their plan falling into place. It was a long shot, a gamble of cosmic proportions, but it was a plan. And right now, that was worth more than all the doubts and sarcasm in the world. All right, let's get back to it, Alden said, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders once more. We've got a rock to crack and a clock to beat. Time's on our side, Ree said with a small smile. Only if we make it that way, Alden replied, his eyes on the swirling data. Let's see if we can pull off a miracle. As the team dove back into their work, Alden felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were standing at the edge of the abyss, but they weren't alone. They had each other, and that was enough to keep fighting, at least for now. The lab's usual hum of machinery felt like a nervous tick more than a comforting constant. Lorne was hunched over his microscope, his brow knitted together as if concentration alone could bend reality to his will. Somewhere between self-doubt and nihilism, he wondered if the particles were mocking him. "Hey, Lorne," Ree called, her voice dripping with the usual casual indifference, "don't go falling in love with that rock now. We've got enough problems without a romantic subplot." "Trust me," Lorne grunted, not looking up. "The rock's not my type, too." Unpredictable. Alden paced behind them, his eyes flicking from monitor to monitor like a gambler watching horses at the track, each second ticking away his life savings. "We need a breakthrough, not a breakdown." Juno's voice crackled over the speakers, managing to sound both chipper and profoundly disinterested. "Gentle reminder, folks. You've got approximately 39 hours until the bureaucratic axe falls. Or until the particles decide to redecorate with our atoms." Kellen tapped away furiously at his tablet. "Oh, don't worry, Juno. Plenty of time for a nervous breakdown, a few existential crises, and maybe a quick nap." "Yeah, a dirt nap," Skelly murmured around his cigar, blowing a lazy smoke ring. "But hey, at least we'll be remembered." "Or forgotten faster than a fart in a wind tunnel." Ree snorted at that and stretched like a languid cat. "You ever think maybe the universe is just a cosmic middle finger? Because I'm starting to feel like the punchline to a joke I never heard." "Cosmic middle finger or not," Alden said, his words clipped with urgency, "we're on borrowed time. Get moving." As if the universe decided to double down on its mockery, a sudden klaxon blared and the lab lights flickered. The sound was a banshee wail that cut through the building tension like a hot knife through cheap butter. "Well, that's not ominous," Ree said, half joking, half serious as she glanced towards the source of the noise. Skelly blew out another cloud of cigar smoke, eyes following the spirals upward. "I've seen this movie. Spoiler, we don't make it," Juno chimed in again. "Containment breach detected. That's not as fun as it sounds. Evacuation protocols are advisable unless you enjoy molecular disassembly." "Fantastic," Alden muttered, whipping around to face the team. "Ree, prep the ship." "Skelly, make sure the damn thing can fly." "On it," Ree replied, already halfway to the exit with Skelly trailing behind her like a grumpy shadow. Alden turned to Lorne, who hadn't moved from his microscope. "Lorne, we need to get out of here before we become an interesting stain." Lorne looked up, his eyes wide with something between revelation and panic. "Wait, I've found something." Alden raised an eyebrow. "If it's not the cure to our current predicament, it can wait." "No, you don't understand," Lorne insisted, his voice gaining momentum. The particles, they're not just sentient, they're a damn message, or more like a warning. A warning about what? Kellen asked, skepticism etched into every syllable. Lorne's eyes were alight with a feverish gleam. A warning about something big, something alien. These aren't just biological weapons, they're breadcrumbs leading to something much worse. Alden felt a chill that had nothing to do with the failing environmental controls. You're saying this whole asteroid is a setup, some kind of alien calling card? Exactly, Lorne nodded, his voice growing more certain. We're looking at the universe's most ominous business card. Well, at least it's not a bill, Skelly quipped as he re-entered the room, tools in hand. Because I'm flat broke. The lab shuddered, a worrying groan echoing through the structure. Alden didn't need a second warning. Grab what you can, we need to get to the ship. As the team scrambled, Kellen paused, tablet in hand. You realize this means we're not just possibly saving the human race, but potentially pissing off something that could use us as intergalactic toilet paper. Noted, Alden replied tersely, motioning Kellen to move. But if it's a choice between that and certain death, I know which one I'd prefer. With the lab's lights flickering like a bad horror movie, they raced through the corridors, alarms blaring a discordant symphony around them. The air smelled of ozone and desperation, a heady mix that did little to improve morale. They reached the ship, a haphazard assembly of metal and hope, nestled in the docking bay. Ree and Skelly were already there, prepping for launch with the kind of speed that could only come from practice or panic. All aboard the runaway train, Ree called over her shoulder, her fingers dancing across the controls. Let's hope it's not a one-way ticket, Alden replied, ushering the rest of the team aboard. Skelly, how's she holding up? Skelly shot him a thumbs up, grinning around his cigar. Like a rusty tin can with delusions of grandeur, but she'll fly. That's the spirit, Alden said, strapping into his seat. Juno, what's our window? Small and rapidly closing, Juno replied, her tone managing to convey both urgency and apathy. Story of my life, Alden muttered, signaling to Ree. Let's get the hell out of here. The ship shuddered to life, engines roaring with a defiance that matched the team's own. As they lifted off, the orbital ring fell away beneath them, a glittering graveyard of hopes and failures. As they breached the atmosphere, Ree let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Well, that was fun. Let's never do it again. Alden chuckled, though it was more of a release of tension than genuine amusement. Agreed. Let's not make a habit of near-death experiences. Lorne, meanwhile, was still poring over his data, eyes alight with the discovery. We need to get this information back to Earth. If there's an alien agenda, they're bound to want to know. Or maybe we'll just be the latest messenger's shot for the bearer of bad news, Kellen quipped, still tapping away on his tablet. Alden shook his head. Either way, we're committed now. This isn't just about us anymore. As they settled into the ship's cramped confines, the weight of their task loomed larger than ever. They were just a handful of misfits in a universe that couldn't care less about their survival, but they had something more than just desperation now. They had knowledge, and that knowledge could be their saving grace or their final downfall. Ree turned from the controls, her expression uncharacteristically serious. So, what's the plan, fearless leader? Alden met her gaze, feeling the weight of his responsibility. We get this data to someone who can make a difference, and we pray that when the aliens come knocking, they're in a talkative mood. Plan A then, Skelly said, stubbing out his cigar with finality. Plan B is what? Hide under the bed until the universe forgets about us. Pretty much, Alden replied, a crooked smile tugging at his lips. But for now, we focus on Plan A. The ship hummed as it cut through space, a fragile shell against the vast emptiness. But inside, amidst the banter and the chaos, there was a determination that burned brightly, a fire that refused to be extinguished. As the stars streaked past, Alden couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something monumental, a turning point in human history. And for better or worse, they were at the center of it. Juno broke the silence, her voice a welcome intrusion. I hope you all enjoy the ride. Please keep your arms and legs inside the ship at all times, and remember, no screaming on the way down. Way down, Kellen echoed, glancing at Alden. She's joking, right? Hard to tell with her, Ree replied, her eyes on the stars. But hey, at least it's never boring. Alden settled back, his mind racing with possibilities and pitfalls. They were hurtling into the unknown on a collision course with fate. But they weren't running away, not anymore. They were running towards the truth, whatever it may be. Let's make it count, Alden said, looking at each of them in turn. Whatever comes next, we face it together, Ree grinned, her irreverence returning. Together until the bitter end, then. Which, knowing us, Skelly added, is likely to be sooner rather than later. Lorne chuckled softly, his eyes still glued to his data. At least we'll have a front row seat to the end of the world. Kellen snorted, shaking his head. Pessimists, the lot of you. Realists, Alden corrected, though he wore a wry smile of his own. And maybe, just maybe, optimists with a death wish. The laughter that followed was genuine, a balm against the darkness surrounding them. They were a ragtag group of survivors, bound together by circumstance and sheer stubbornness. But in that moment, as the ship sped through the void, they were invincible, or at least they believed they could be. And sometimes belief was all it took to change the odds. All right, Alden said, steepling his fingers like some villain in a cheap holovid. We've got what might be our miracle in a bottle, or, at the very least, the universe's cruelest prank. Prank, Lorne echoed, squinting at Alden like he'd just suggested they test the theory by jumping out an airlock without suits. These particles could rewrite human biology. They're practically singing I am the walrus in DNA. Correct me if I'm wrong, Skelly interjected, twirling a ratchet like a gunslinger. But last time I checked, alien warnings weren't exactly known for their subtlety or their musical selections. Point being, Alden continued, ignoring the metaphorical tomatoes being thrown his way, we've got a chance to turn this thing from a planetary wipeout into a panacea. Panacea, Kellen chimed in, not even looking up. Or just the world's nicest way to tell us to lie down and take it. I dunno, Ree said, her feet propped up on the console, but if it can clear up my excruciating hangover from Saturday nights, I say go for it. We're talking about reprogramming a weapon of mass extinction into something beneficial, Alden pressed, pacing the cramped space like a caged lion. It could be the answer to diseases we haven't even heard of yet. And what if it's not? Lorne shot back, his voice tinged with equal parts skepticism and frustration. What if we're just opening the door for something worse, like your love life? Skelly smirked, earning a chuckle from Ree and a digital eye roll from Juno, who didn't even have eyes but could convey disdain better than any human. Alden sighed, the weight of the decision resting heavily on his shoulders, heavier than Skelly's cigars. Look, I get it, it's a gamble, but what isn't? We're already in the line of fire. We might as well try to shoot back. And potentially hit ourselves in the foot, Kellen remarked, finally glancing up with a raised eyebrow. Sounds like a typical day at the office. Ree stretched, her chair creaking ominously. Well, you know what they say, go big or go home. And since we don't have a home to go to, I'm in. That's the spirit, Alden said, though it was unclear whether he was relieved or merely resigned to the madness of it all. All right, Skelly conceded, waving a hand as if to bat away flies. Let's see if we can turn Armageddon into an aspirin commercial. Lorne, despite his earlier protest, leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. It could work, I suppose, if we don't blow ourselves up first, which is always a possibility, Alden acknowledged, his tone more pragmatic than hopeful. Juno's voice crackled through the ship's comm system, her usual disinterest tinged with a shade of curiosity. Statistically speaking, the odds are not in your favor, but hey, who doesn't love a long shot? You're just a wealth of positivity, aren't you, Juno? Kellen snarked, already tapping away at his tablet, preparing for whatever harebrained scheme they were about to embark on. Think of me as your cosmic reality check, Juno replied smoothly. Someone's got to keep you grounded. The ship rattled as it navigated through debris, the orbital ring's remnants bouncing off the hull with unsettling regularity. Like rain, if rain was made of shattered dreams and rusted metal. Okay, so we're agreed, Alden said, leaning over the console to punch in coordinates. We get back to the lab, we stabilize what we can of the rock's particles, and we see if we can retrofit them into something that won't turn us into piles of goo. Talk about setting the bar high, Ree quipped, her fingers dancing over the controls. But then again, my dating life's been worse. Lorne grunted, not fully convinced but apparently willing to go along for the ride. Guess it's better than sitting around waiting for something to explode in our faces. Optimism, Skelly said with mock sincerity. It's what's for dinner. The ship lurched forward, powered by desperation and duct tape, heading back towards the lab. The orbital ring loomed ahead, a testament to human ingenuity and folly, and it wasn't getting any more stable. As they docked, the team disembarked with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The lab was a chaotic mess, the symphony of alarms still bleeding their discordant tune, lights flickering like a strobe gone wrong. Alden took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. All right, folks. This is where we either make history or become it. Famous last words, Kellen muttered, his gaze darting around the lab as though expecting it to collapse any moment. Skelly, ever the pragmatist, stubbed out his cigar and got to work alongside Lorne, who was already running simulations and calculations on the rogue particles, his brow furrowed in concentration. Ree and Kellen double-checked the ship systems, ensuring their escape route was viable, just in case their grand experiment turned out to be a spectacular failure. Alden hovered between stations, his mind racing with possibilities and pitfalls. Lorne, what's the status on the containment field for these particles? Stable, Lorne replied, though his tone lacked conviction. For now, at least. We'll need to work fast. Story of my life, Skelly tossed over his shoulder, his hands a blur as he assisted with the containment protocols. The lab shuddered, a reminder that they were standing on borrowed time and shaky ground. Alden braced himself, glancing at his team, his friends, really, and for a moment he felt a spark of hope. Let's turn this cosmic middle finger into a thumbs up, he said, though his grin was as much a challenge as it was an attempt at levity. Lorne adjusted his glasses, peering into the microscope with renewed focus. We've got a chance, a slim one, but it's there. The particles are responding to the stimuli. We might just pull this off. And if we don't, Ree asked, her voice light but her eyes serious. Then we go out as the universe's finest example of Murphy's Law, Kellen answered, not missing a beat. Alden nodded, feeling the thrum of the ship beneath his feet, the pulse of the lab around them. This was it, their Hail Mary, their last stand, or perhaps their greatest triumph. Let's make it count, he repeated, knowing full well the odds were stacked against them. The team worked in a synchronized chaos, each member playing their part in the unfolding drama. It was a dance of desperation and determination, a final bid against the encroaching void. Skelly's voice cut through the frantic activity. Containment's holding, but it won't last forever. We need to hurry. Nearly there, Lorne called out, his attention fixed on the readouts, hands moving with a precision born of necessity. Ree and Kellen monitored the equipment, ensuring everything was in place for the final push. It was a delicate balance, a high-wire act without a net. Alden chewed on the inside of his cheek, a nervous habit that had stuck with him since childhood. Okay, on my mark, we initiate the conversion sequence. The lab systems hummed to life, a symphony of technology and human ingenuity, raw, flawed, but undeniably potent. Now, Alden shouted, and the team sprang into action. The conversion sequence unfolded in a series of blinding flashes and a cacophony of electronic noise. Particles collided, shifted, reformed, and for a moment the air was thick with tension and potential. Then silence. The team held their breath, waiting for either salvation or catastrophe. Seconds stretched into eternity, each heartbeat a thunderous echo in the stillness. Finally, Lorne let out a breath, his voice trembling with disbelief and relief. It's working. The particles are stable. They're responding just as we hoped. Well, I'll be damned, Skelly murmured, his grin as wide as a cat that got the cream. Looks like we just pulled off the impossible. Ree's laughter was bright and infectious, a release of all the anxiety and fear. We did it, we actually did it. Alden felt a weight lift from his shoulders, a sense of triumph that was almost foreign. We've got to get this data back to Earth. They need to know what we've accomplished, and hope they don't just turn it into another weapon, Kellen added, tempered realism mingling with the victory. One battle at a time, Alden said, clapping a hand on Kellen's shoulder. For now, let's just savor the win. Juno's voice cut in, her tone more animated than usual. Congratulations on not dying. This time. Thanks, Juno, Alden replied, unable to keep the smile from his face. I knew we could count on your unwavering support. Consider it my gift, she said, with what sounded suspiciously like a hint of amusement. The team gathered their notes, each of them running on adrenaline and a sense of accomplishment. They'd done the impossible, turned the tide, and bought humanity a fighting chance. As they prepared to leave, Alden took a moment to look at each member of his crew. We've got a long road ahead, but whatever comes, we face it together. Together, Lorne echoed, his eyes still glimmering with the thrill of their success. Ree gave a mock salute, grinning like a Cheshire cat. To the end of the universe and beyond. Let's hope the universe keeps its surprises to a minimum, Skelly said, already lighting another cigar. The laughter that followed was rich and genuine, a testament to their spirit and camaraderie. They were a ragtag group of misfits, but they had become more than that. They were a force to be reckoned with. As they boarded the ship, Alden felt a surge of determination and hope. They were moving forward with knowledge, with unity, and with a purpose that couldn't be denied. All right, folks, Alden said, strapping into his seat. Let's take this show on the road. The ship roared to life, lifting off from the lab that had been their crucible, their battleground, their place of triumph. Next stop, Earth, Ree announced, her voice tinged with excitement and anticipation. As they soared into the void, Alden looked out at the stars, feeling a sense of belonging, of purpose, of hope. They were more than the sum of their parts, more than their mistakes and their failures. They were something new, a team, a family, a beacon against the darkness, and whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The lab was in shambles, but for once, it wasn't from the usual half-assed maintenance or the team's tendency to prioritize survival over housekeeping. No, today's chaos was courtesy of a job well done, a fact that didn't make the mess any less daunting. Alden Quill leaned against a counter, arms crossed, surveying the aftermath with the expression of a man who'd just been told his long-lost uncle left him a fortune, only to find out it's in the form of 50 tons of non-recyclable waste. Well, folks, he said, his voice echoing around the lab, congratulations on not blowing us up. I'm sure the universe is as surprised as we are. I'm shocked, Ree Verdon added, wiping her hands on the back of her jumpsuit. Who would have thought that turning an alien weapon into a miracle cure wouldn't end in catastrophic failure? Hey, if we keep this up, I might start believing we can save the universe and not just keep it on life support. Skelly chimed in, inspecting a scorch mark on the wall that looked uncomfortably like a Rorschach test gone wrong. I guess even blind squirts find nuts sometimes, Lorne Zill muttered from his station, his tone suggesting he wasn't entirely sure they were out of the woods yet. Well, we've got about 38 hours before the brass up top wants to hear from us, so let's make sure they're not getting an SOS, Alden said, pushing off the counter and moving to help Kellen, who was knee-deep in cables and circuits, trying to make sense of the miracle they'd just pulled off. You know, it's remarkable how much you guys managed to accomplish with duct tape and sheer denial, Juno remarked dryly, cutting through the comms with her usual brand of sarcastic enthusiasm. Thanks, Juno. I'll be sure to mention that in our next performance review, Kellen replied, not looking up from his tablet. Adding can do miracles with junk to our resumes. Make sure you spell miracles right. Would hate to mislead anyone, Skelly quipped, tossing a wrench to Lorne, who caught it with the reflexes of someone who'd learned early on that flying tools were a fact of life. The lab was buzzing now, each member of the team throwing themselves into the work with a kind of frenetic energy that bordered on mania. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving that they weren't just a bunch of space cowboys playing with matches. All right, data's compiled and the containment field is holding. For now, Lorne announced, peering over the edge of his microscope like a scientist who'd just discovered his life's work consisted of coloring inside the lines. And the reprogramming? Alden asked, peering over Kellen's shoulder at the data stream flowing across the tablet's screen. Stable, Kellen replied, his voice tinged with disbelief. I mean, it's not exactly textbook, but it's holding together like a drunk at closing time. High praise, Ree said, watching the monitors flicker with a mixture of awe and skepticism. Let's just hope it doesn't hurl on our shoes at the end of the night. Alden chuckled, but it was hollow, lacking the usual mirth. This wasn't over yet. Juno, what's the status on our communication uplink, functioning at 73% capacity? Juno responded with the robotic equivalent of a shrug. Should be enough to reach command, assuming nobody breathes too hard on the relay. Good enough for government work, Skelly said, lighting another cigar with a flourish. Let's hope the big wigs are ready to hear what we've got to say, assuming they don't decide we're expendable and nuke us from orbit to be safe, Lorne remarked, his voice tinged with dark humor. Wouldn't be the first time they've decided to cut their losses. Ah, the sweet embrace of bureaucracy, Ree said, rolling her eyes. Always there to remind us that red tape is thicker than blood. With a plan in place, and the prospect of not dying seeming slightly less remote, the team buckled down, each member tackling their tasks with the efficiency of people who'd learned the hard way that time was never on their side. The hours ticked by in a blur of calculations, adjustments, and the occasional outburst of frustration as yet another unforeseen complication reared its ugly head. Why do these systems always fail right when we need them? Kellen grumbled, rebooting his terminal for what felt like the 100th time. Because nothing in life is free, least of all reliable tech, Skelly replied, his voice muffled by the cigar clenched between his teeth. And if it is, you're probably paying for it with your soul. Finally, as the clock ticked down towards their deadline, Alden called the team together for what he hoped would be the last briefing before they transmitted their findings. All right, folks, let's get this show on the road, he said, looking around at his crew, their faces worn but determined. We've got a cure, or at least the blueprint for one. Time to let the powers that be know we've pulled off the impossible. And if they don't believe us, Lorne asked, his skepticism a familiar comfort in the chaos. Then we'll just have to show them, Alden replied, a sly grin tugging at his lips. After all, seeing is believing, right? The team gathered around the comm station, Kellen's fingers dancing over the controls with the precision of a man who'd long since accepted that he was the only thing standing between order and chaos. Uplink established, Juno announced, her voice carrying an undertone of anticipation. You're live in 3, 2, 1. Command, this is Quill. Do you copy? Alden said, leaning into the mic and praying that the signal would hold long enough for them to get their message across. Reading you loud and clear, Quill, came the crisp reply, the administrative efficiency almost palpable through the static. Report. Not dead yet, if that's what you're asking, Alden said, his tone light despite the gravity of the situation. And we've got news. Good news. The kind that doesn't involve explosions. Go on, the voice prompted, a hint of curiosity breaking through the bureaucratic veneer. We've reprogrammed the alien tech. It's not a weapon anymore, it's a cure. A damn good one too, Alden said, feeling the weight of the words settle over him like a tangible thing. There was a pause, the kind that stretched out like the tension before a gunfight in one of those old Earth westerns. Finally, the voice crackled back to life. That's unexpected, the voice admitted, a hint of grudging admiration creeping in. What's your status? Particles are stable, containment is solid, and we're not glowing in the dark, re-quipped, her voice laced with equal parts relief and sarcasm. We're transmitting the data now, Kellen added, tapping a sequence into the console with deft fingers. You'll have everything you need to replicate our work and the alien threat, Command asked, the question hanging in the air like a noose. Neutralized for now, Lorne replied, his voice calm and steady, but we'll need to keep an eye on it, just in case. Another pause, and Alden could almost hear the gears turning on the other side, the wheels of bureaucracy grinding against the unexpected. Understood, the voice finally said, a note of respect creeping into the clinical tones. We'll take it from here. Stand by for further instructions. And just like that, the link went dead, leaving the team staring at each other in the sudden silence. Well, Skelly said, exhaling a cloud of smoke with a satisfied sigh. I'd say that's a win. I'll drink to that, Ree agreed, though there was no sign of a celebratory drink anywhere in sight. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Lorne cautioned, though the hint of a smile on his face suggested he was willing to celebrate a little too. Yeah, don't worry. I'm not planning on throwing a party, Alden said, clapping Kellen on the back. But I think we've earned a bit of a breather. Agreed, Kellen said, leaning back in his chair and stretching his arms over his head. Preferably somewhere that doesn't smell like burnt circuits and desperation. Don't get too comfortable, Juno interjected. You've still got a few hours before you're officially out of the woods. Thanks for the reminder, Juno, Alden replied, a grin tugging at his lips. Now, if you don't mind, I think we'll take a moment to bask in our collective genius. As the team settled in for a well-deserved break, Alden couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what they'd accomplished. They'd taken the impossible and made it their own, and for the first time in a long time, the future didn't seem quite so bleak. All right, team, he said, raising an imaginary glass in a mock toast. Here's to us, the space cowboys who saved the day and lived to tell the tale, Ree added, grinning like a maniac. To the next adventure, Skelly said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. To whatever comes next, Lorne agreed, his tone soft but resolute. And as they sat there, surrounded by the chaos and debris of their triumph, Alden knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them the same way they faced everything else. Together, with grit, determination, and just a touch of insanity. After all, they were experts at surviving the impossible, and that was something worth celebrating. The infernal whirring sound of the lab's fans was almost soothing now. Earth's orbital ring, once a junkyard of dreams and debris, had witnessed the impossible. Alden Quill and his team had just saved the day with little more than alien leftovers, and the kind of ingenuity that bordered on sheer lunacy. As the team sat amid the clutter and chaos of their lab, the reality of their achievement started to sink in. Juno, the AI with a penchant for sarcasm, cut through the commotion like a knife through cheap butter. Congratulations, team. You've managed to do what most people could only dream of, survive your own stupidity. Gee, thanks, Juno, Skelly said, flicking the remnants of his cigar into the nearest receptacle. I'll add that glowing endorsement to my CV. Alden leaned back in his chair, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. Who would have thought we actually did it? I mean, I half expected us to go down in a blaze of glory, or at least a mildly entertaining explosion. Would have been a hell of a way to go, Ree said, smirking as she surveyed the disheveled group. But hey, we'll take what we can get. The mood in the lab was one of cautious optimism, the kind that had been in short supply ever since the asteroid decided to swing by for an unannounced visit. Lorne, ever the skeptic, wasn't quite ready to break out the champagne, or whatever passed for it in space these days. Let's not start patting ourselves on the back just yet, Lorne warned, his expression as serious as a heart attack on the event horizon. We've still got bureaucrats to deal with. They'll probably want to dissect everything we've done and find a way to claim all the credit. True, Kellen interjected, still tapping away at his tablet. But they've got their work cut out for them. We've got the data to back us up, and it's hard to argue with results. Harder than arguing with bureaucrats, which is like trying to convince a black hole to cough up last week's lunch. Alden remarked. The team's success had not gone unnoticed. Messages had already begun trickling in from Earth, lauding their accomplishment and promising rewards that, in a better universe, might actually materialize. Juno pinged with another message. Earth Command extends their commendations and wants you all back for the debrief. Apparently, there's talk of a medal. Great, Skelly said dryly. A shiny bit of metal to remind us of how close we came to becoming space dust. Don't knock it, Ree said, nudging him playfully. It's not every day you get to add almost eradicated by a cosmic pebble to your list of achievements. As the dust began to settle, it became clear that the team's actions had done more than just avert disaster. Their breakthrough with the alien tech opened the door to potential collaborations with civilizations that, until now, had been little more than distant threats or idle curiosities. Guess we're the pioneers of interstellar diplomacy now, Alden mused. Who'd have thought a bunch of misfits like us would be changing the universe one accidental miracle at a time? It's a brave new world, Lorne said, though his tone suggested he was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Let's just hope it doesn't bite us in the ass. The prospect of rebuilding loomed large, both for Earth and for Alden's team. It was a chance to start anew, to forge a future that wasn't dictated by fear or desperation. Hey, maybe we'll get to fix up the orbital ring, Kellen said, eyeing the dilapidated structure around them. Turn this place into something less depressing. Good luck with that, Skelly snorted. I've seen asteroid craters with more curb appeal. Always the optimist, Ree chipped in, grinning as she tossed a stray piece of equipment into a bin marked salvage. But who knows? Maybe this is the start of something good. Or, at the very least, the end of something bad, Alden said. Guess that's something to celebrate. With a collective sigh, the crew stood up, stretching out the kinks from long iors hunched over consoles and makeshift workstations. The lab that had been their home, their battleground, and their salvation felt both smaller and larger than it had before. So, what's next? Lorne asked, stuffing his hands into his pockets as he surveyed the room. We heading back to Earth for the inevitable circus. Eventually, Alden replied, scrubbing a hand over his face. But first, I think we've earned a bit of downtime. Let the bureaucrats sort themselves out while we recharge. Sounds good to me, Ree said, stifling a yawn. Maybe even catch a holo-vid or two. I hear there's a new series out, something about a space detective and his talking cat. Kellen shook his head, grinning. You and your weird shows. But yeah, some downtime sounds perfect. As the crew filed out of the lab, leaving behind the clutter and chaos of their latest triumph, Alden paused for a moment, taking it all in. They'd come a long way from a ragtag group of outcasts to heroes of the orbital ring. And though the future was uncertain, it was also full of promise. Juno, keep an eye on things while we're gone, Alden instructed, a grin tugging at his lips, and try not to blow anything up. Your confidence in me is staggering, Juno replied with mock indignation. But don't worry, I'll keep everything in one piece. Probably. As the doors slid shut behind them, Alden couldn't help but feel a twinge of anticipation. The universe was out there, waiting for them to make their mark. And whatever happened next, they'd face it together, armed with nothing more than their wits, their courage, and a healthy dose of sarcasm. To whatever comes next, he murmured, echoing Lorne's earlier sentiment. And as they made their way to the shuttle that would take them back to Earth, Alden knew that whatever the future held, they were ready. After all, they'd already done the impossible once. What's a little more chaos compared to that? Back on Earth, the debrief was every bit the bureaucratic ordeal they'd expected. A marathon of meetings, presentations, and explanations that made the asteroid feel like a pleasant distraction. But through it all, the team remained unflinchingly themselves. So you're telling me, droned the man from public relations, a specimen of human monotony, that you turned an alien weapon into a cure? Alden nodded, resisting the urge to roll his eyes. Yeah, that's the gist of it. Remarkable, the man said, not sounding like he found it remarkable at all. And you expect the world to just take your word for it? Well, Ree piped up, We figured glowing testimonials might be a bit much. Skelly snorted, barely suppressing a laugh. We could always throw in a free t-shirt for good measure. My team saved the planet and all I got was this lousy acknowledgement. The debriefing continued, a blur of repeated questions and thinly veiled skepticism. But eventually the tone shifted, the doubt giving way to reluctant admiration. They had, after all, done the impossible. When they finally emerged, blinking into the fluorescent lights of the corridor, Alden felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They'd faced down the threat, the bureaucracy, and come out the other side intact. "Think they'll give us a parade?" Kellen joked, stretching out his arms. "Or maybe just a nice fruit basket. Knowing them, it'll be a lifetime supply of red tape," Lorne said, shaking his head. "Well, whatever it is, we'll deal with it," Alden said, a smile tugging at his lips. "After all, we've handled worse." In the days that followed, Alden and his team found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Their discovery had ripples far beyond what they'd anticipated, sparking a wave of scientific and diplomatic interest across the globe. Offers to collaborate with alien species started pouring in, each one a testament to what they'd achieved. There were talks of joint research initiatives, of shared technology and cultural exchanges, ideas that had once seemed as far-fetched as the notion of humans surviving their own hubris. But amid all the excitement, the team remained grounded, their feet firmly planted on the ground, literally and figuratively. "Bet they'll want us to head up some new task force or something," Skelly mused, watching as the news feeds scrolled by, each one trumpeting a new angle on the team's success. "Probably," Lorne agreed. "And we'll get to do it all over again. Lucky us." "Hey, could be worse," Ree said, grinning. "Could be stuck on some backwater asteroid mining for scrap." "Not sure which is worse," Alden deadpanned. "The eternal meetings or the thought of mining." But deep down, he knew they were ready for whatever came next. They'd faced the end of the world and won. They'd learned to rely on each other, to trust in their own abilities, even when the odds were stacked against them. "Guess we're pioneers now," Kellen said, closing his laptop with a click. "Champions of human ingenuity and all that." "Not too shabby for a bunch of misfits," Ree replied, a glint of pride in her eyes. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, the team gathered one last time, a small, jubilant celebration that was as much about what lay ahead as it was about what they'd accomplished. The stars glittered above them, a canvas waiting to be filled with new stories, new adventures. And as they raised their glasses in a toast to their shared future, Alden knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them together. "To us," he said, lifting his glass high. "The space cowboys who changed the game, and lived to laugh about it," Skelly added with a chuckle. "To the next impossible thing," Lorne said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "And to never doing it alone," Ree concluded, her gaze sweeping over her friends, her family. As the team clinked their glasses together, the sound rang out in the still night, a promise, a declaration, and a reminder that they were ready for whatever came next. After all, they'd already saved the world once, and there was no telling what they'd do next.